This is the first tutorial, level 2 of Autumn Leaves. If there are any areas that don't seem clear and you don't fancy going back to level 1, check out my Jazz Snippets folder on my website and my Tippy site, which will have very bite-sized bits of information. So for example, if you're not quite sure of a melodic minor, you should be able to just click on that. In this tutorial, I'm going to be showing you ways to get around the harmony and also introducing some lines and also some concepts when improvising. These are some melodic notes that fit the harmony. So they're chord tones, and the first 16 bars I have a pattern of chord tones, which is on my worksheet, and then I move through to demonstrating some pentatonic patterns, using mostly 1, 2, 3, 5. I'll explain that in a minute, and a little scale on the descent. And in the last 8 bars I've just got a mixture of both. So for instance, chord tones on the first chord, which as we learnt in the first few tutorials is chord 2, which sounds like that. The chord tones outlining that would be. Where I've varied it differently to the demonstration I gave in level 1 is that instead of going up on the chord tones, which really after a while sounds like an exercise, I've tried to make the music go up and then the music go down. So it has a little bit of a shape to it. It's a word that people use often when describing music, or it needs a bit more shape, and that's, you don't really want things just constantly go up. So the idea of this going up and coming down is a good concept in music. So coming down, I haven't started it on the root, so I've started it on the third of the next chord, which is a chord 5, to the major, and then use the chord tones. So that's what I've done mostly in the first section, and in the middle 8 I've done an upwards moving pattern pentatonic. Well, not all of the notes are the pentatonic, but the idea of pentatonic patterns. Or you could say a scale that misses out a note. So we've got, and on the descent I've come down as a scale. So that's what I've done there, and then the last section I've just varied it really, kind of a combination of both of those. So I'm going to play it. I'm going to play the first A as I've written it in the worksheet. The second A, I'm going to just vary it a little bit, maybe a bit more of a feel of improvising, and then after that I'll just read what's actually on the sheet. Since the second A is just a repetition of the first A, it'd be more interesting to see how that can go, become a little bit more varied if I just change the rhythm. So 1, 2, 3, 4. And there's a slight gap between the 2A sections. That was just because, I was thinking I was going on to the next line and didn't realise there was a repeat. But I did realise there was a repeat, but I hadn't clocked it. So you can see how the second A section was much more interesting. The next step could be playing those notes but adding in a few passing notes. So a passing note just passes between, so chord tones. So here's the root and the third. A passing note would be a note that goes between the two. So I'm now going to improvise a line over the whole sequence. I'm literally going to use this as a skeleton, and then I'm going to be putting in extra notes. Sometimes I might just stick to these notes, but I would never play it just with crotchets. It's really boring to do that. What it actually reminds me of a little bit is a bass line, because you can imagine if it's in the left hand. There are certain things it's not quite successful at doing. It doesn't probably hit enough roots at the right time, but that's actually would be a really good exercise for a bass player. But when you play it in the right hand, or if you're a single line instrument like a horn, you don't want to be just playing crotchet after crotchet, one note after one note. It's really, really not great. So you want to be putting in rests and other ideas, but I'm just going to improvise with these chord tones in mind. Okay, 1, a 2, a 1, 2, 3, 4. So that's a pure improvised approach to playing that, using the chord tones as a guide to get round the music. And in a previous tutorial I was using the guide tones, but now I'm using all of the chord tones. As a pianist, that's what I do without realising it, because of course as a pianist you're marking out a lot of the chords in the left hand. At the moment I'm doing a lot of rooted chords or simple ideas, but if I was playing I might be playing all of these extensions. So once you've got a lot of notes in your left hand, it does help you, because you realise that those four notes of the chord are obviously going to be good, and there's only 7 notes in most scales, so that only leaves 3 to choose from. But if you're a saxophone player or a trumpet player, you're not going to have that, I'd say luxury, but some might call it a burden of having 2 hands or having 2 things to think about at the same time. So just being aware of that harmony is really going to help, and having those chord tones in your maybe just, you might see them on the stave and have that as a photographic memory. Maybe your ear will remember it, but they are important notes, and something definitely that has to be learned. And that's the end of the first part of the tutorial level 2 on Autumn Leaves.